For the outside environment and communities, simple research shows that climate change is at an all-time high. Genocide and mass shootings is at an all-time high. Inflation is at an all-time high, causing economic instability and hardships across the country. It's increasing to the point where the middle class is quickly fading away, leaving only the struggling and the rich. Then, on the flip side, we have individual and or personal health that is at a high risk. Depression is at an all-time high. Anxiety is at an all-time high. Obesity is at an all-time high. Cancer, diabetes, neurological disorders like autism, CVDs, and so much more. It's increasing to the point where the middle class is quickly fading away, leaving only the struggling and the rich. Then, on the flip side, we have individual and or personal health that is at a high risk. Depression is at an all-time high. Anxiety is at an all-time high. Obesity is at an all-time high. Cancer, diabetes, neurological disorders like autism, CVDs, and so much more.
We can come to the conclusion that we are in an all-time crisis, a crisis that affects us on our physical, mental, and more importantly, spiritual level, a crisis where we need answers and solutions, which is ultimately what this podcast is about. We're not here to distract you from the truth, as we have enough of that, but we're here to give it to you. This is a youth-to-youth conversation from our perspectives, as we're the future. We're the ones that'll have to carry this weight that I just mentioned and decide whether we're going to live in a world full of lies and issues versus a world full of truth and solutions. So as your hosts, Darian, Divine, Tamia, and Anaya, I welcome you to Rising Young Voices podcast.
And I feel like we're going to start off this podcast with a question. We're doing this podcast. It's about communication and self-expression. I feel like that's very important. So the first question that I have to all my other hosts out here is, can you share a time when expressing yourself became difficult because of wanting to obey the ideals of the adult figures in your life?
I was raised, I wouldn't say hyper religious, but really religious because my grandpa was a pastor while he was alive. And as I kind of grew into my body, puberty and everything, especially as a Black woman, we're told to really hide ourselves or you're considered like fast or things of that nature. And going to like an all white elementary school, I was always kind of different. So that backlash from the adult peers in my life kind of made me realize early on that we are treated differently as Black individuals in school.
I can talk about mine because I would say like how just like my parents provided me like with everything, and just like I shouldn't have nothing like to complain about, or just like my feelings really don't matter, or they're not as big because it's like I have everything I can ask for. So that just made me like not be able to like express myself or just like go about it, because I'm like, why should I be able to express myself if I got everything? Like despite all my issues and all that, I just put them to the side because of that. Like when my parents didn't realize like I actually had issues going on like outside of the stuff that they were providing me with. Like just because they provide me with things doesn't mean that I'm happy.
That's real. I would say that's like the same for me. And with trying to express my mental health to my parents, it didn't go so well. And so I kind of just had to like sugarcoat some things, like how I felt, and like trying to express myself just regarding my mental health around my parents, because they wasn't trying to go for that. They wasn't trying to hear it for real.
My fault, y'all. For me, a time where I feel like expressing myself became difficult has been since I was born, since I was young, since I don't know when. It was always hard for me to express it. It's because I used to have like a speech impediment at the age of 5, and I couldn't express myself for nothing. I mean, I couldn't talk till I was like 5 years old, and when I tried to express myself, it's like people will misunderstand me. So I'll try to say a word or try to say something, and then people like what you say, and just keep on. And it used to just irritated me. So I used to just be quiet all day, just because I couldn't really talk to people. I really couldn't communicate to people because they didn't understand me. So yeah, it always been hard, and especially for adult figures and stuff like that. Trying to get my parents to listen to me, teachers to listen to me, stuff like that. Trying to get help and stuff like that. They wouldn't even like help me for real. They put me to a whole bunch of classes. So
You know what I'm saying? Another thing is like parents like that accountability part, like where we can't tell them about themselves or like without coming off as disrespectful or something like that. Like I be like, you can tell me about myself, but then when it comes to like telling my parents stuff about themselves, it's like, no, you're disrespectful. Like
I got you. Yeah. And also always been like always had to like change up to my tone because of especially when it comes to teachers, which nowadays I'm not on terms like with a lot of my teachers because they used to always suppress on how I interacted, on how I feel, and on how I do kind of things, stuff like that. They always was like, no, you need to do it like this, you need to do it like that, and always annoyed me or pissed me off. All right, so our next question for you is what role does society play in how you express yourself? My fault. Social media play in how you express yourself.
I would say for me, well, at least when I was younger, because I like to say like the internet raised me. So like I was on social media at like a really young age. And so I used to like try to like keep up with trends and like keep up with certain aesthetics to like just like with fashion or just in general, like with music and stuff like that. And it also had to do with my environment. I went to a predominantly Black school and we was real ghetto. And so I was like keeping up with the latest NBA YoungBoy songs and stuff like that. And it's kind of like now with social media, I found my own niche that I really align with, but it definitely took a while to get there. But I would say now um I would say my social media is very like Afrocentric, which it kind of did that on its own. Like I didn't purposely look for something like that, but it's just like that now. And it's definitely more like artistic and stuff. And I feel like that's just me, like with the fashion that I use, like the music that I'm interested in, which is like a variety. It's just like various things and various aesthetics.
Okay, I definitely really agree with Divine. I think that because social media exposes you and all the influences of all the cultures, like everybody, you get to really like find your niche because of like algorithms and stuff like that. Because when I was younger, I used to be like a really big tomboy because all my cousins were boys, and that's kind of just like all I knew. But as I got onto social media, I got to really find the niche of fashion that I liked and things like that. And Pinterest has like been a really big influence on the way that I express myself visually and like my hairstyles and things of that nature. So I definitely say that it really depends on the person and depends on their background and their ability to be a leader or a follower. Because if I feel like if you're a natural born leader or like you really value your own identity and self-expression, then you won't get caught up in every trend and really succumb to the wave of what's popular, and you can really like find your own space.
What about you, Darian? How does social media ever play a factor in the way you express yourself?
Oh hell yeah. It did some good, it did some bad. I mean, social media is like a double-edged sword in the way of how people can wield it or how people can use it, right? I wouldn't be in this place right now. I wouldn't know the things I know. I wouldn't be even here as a youth lead alliance leader, a team leader, if it wasn't for social media, right? But on the other hand, social media has done some bad to me as well. I mean, it has affected my mental tremendously back because I used to try to follow the trends too as well. I used to try to be a part of something that my spirit knew I wasn't, and secretly down my mental knew I wasn't supposed to be a part of that thing. I'm supposed to be my own thing, right? But I was so busy trying to fit in on how social media said so, which is terrible, and I don't recommend nobody to do that, trying to fit in what social media says so, or what social media is following the next trend of social media. I really don't agree with that because it's a toxic environment trying to keep up with all these trends because it's super fast too. I mean, shoot, social media is gonna age you. Like seriously, scientifically, it has been proven that trying to keep like doing these trends and stuff is gonna age your telomeres on the chromosomes, and it's gonna age you super fast. So just scientifically and spiritually, it's not good for you to do that. But what I mean, social media has helped me a lot is because social media also kind of helped me find my own place. It kind of helped me find my own way to express myself. When I found my community that related to me and related to my interests, once I found and learned knowledge of self, then it really kind of helped me feel like I wasn't the only one who was feeling this. I wasn't the only one who was thinking like this. There was other people out there on social media who was thinking exactly the same thing that I think. Exactly does the exact same thing that I do. So yeah.
I think that's really true. And I want to go into Dr. Moffat's question about how do you not succumb to social media and the trends and everything like that. And I think media literacy is super duper important, especially because even little toddlers and kids as young as like 2 and 3 years old, they use not necessarily social media. Well, actually, yeah, because YouTube Shorts is now a form of social media, but they're watching media all the time. Like that's a part of our lives now. And I think it's important to differentiate what's real and what's not, like the fake news situation, and to have the critical thinking to, as you consume all of this vast myriad of like platforms and things like that, um, about yourself, and you stay true to yourself, and you question everything, and you just don't believe everything that you see, and don't follow everyone, and don't go just with the waves just because somebody told you to. And I feel like a lot of kids don't get that, and a lot of parents don't really monitor what their kids are watching. I know my parents really didn't monitor what I was watching on YouTube when I was younger. And I think that it could really make or break someone if they don't have that background of people supporting them and making sure that what they're watching is appropriate and that they are okay mentally.
I would say for sure, just like knowing yourself and just like constantly just like being true to yourself, and like on top of media literacy, because I know like when I was young on social media, I used to like believe everything the shade room said, like, or everything like a gossip page said or something. So just being able to like Anaya said, like ask questions and like look things up on your own, like Google. Like you see something on social media, just look it up on Google real quick and see like a news article or something pop up about it. Just to make sure like you're not feeding into just like toxic or just like something somebody made up just to promote fear.
Yep. I agree with you completely. That's gonna ruin your life. You got a question, like when especially on social media, anything from Shade Room and Say Cheese Instagram pages to like the big press like CNN and Fox News and stuff like that. You need to question every single thing that you see.
I want to lead us to our next question about self-expression, and it's how do you handle negative feedback or criticism about your self-expression?
Back then, I used to take that like seriously. Like I mentioned before, I used to have a speech impediment and like self-criticism on my self-expression because I used to get criticized a lot. I got made fun of during school and all that. It said there was stuff like that. I used to get criticized a lot on how I expressed myself. So I just kind of didn't express myself. I was quiet. And that's the only thing I can do. But now I just don't give a shit. Like I don't care about what people will say because I'm comfortable in my own mind, my own body, and my own spirit. I know what kind of person I am. I know my skills. I know everything that I do. I know where I'm going to become and where I'm going to end up in the future. So why should I care about somebody who's making fun of me or criticizing me on my self-expression? It's like, so what?
I agree with that because I really did used to care. I was so sensitive growing up. Like anybody can hurt my feelings or make me cry. And I'm still a little sensitive now because it's like I never had those affirmations. Like my parents never was like, it was like always hard pressure, not just like that soft love. And so it was just like I grew up with that tough love. And when I really needed that like soft love. So now it's like I give that to myself. And it's like I tell myself what I am. And now like I know nobody can tell me what I'm not and who I am because I know who I am and I know what I want to be. And like how I deal with that, I think is like I take into consideration. I'm like, if I'm not like that, like why do I let that bother me or why do I let that like affect me? But I really think it depends who it is. Like when my mom say something about me, that's still gonna hurt my feelings. Still,
I'm going to segue into Dr. Moffat's question on how do you get to the point of really not caring what people think of your self-expression.
Oh, that's what I
And I
meant.
want to first say that wanting to be accepted is so human. Like everybody wants to be accepted. Everybody wants to be liked and to be loved. Like that's just human nature. So it is so hard and takes so much self-respect and like knowing your worth to get to the point where you really don't care. And not to say that you don't care about other people's opinions on you, but that you take into consideration why they have that opinion and if it's worth changing who you are as a person just because somebody else kind of thinks that you should. And I definitely agree with Tamaya. It is so hard when my mom is like, why do you do certain things like that? I never would have did certain things like that, especially like, your elders. You try to be as respectful as possible, but like you are your own person. Like we're all our own people. We all have different minds. We have different brains that's what makes us so special. So it definitely takes time and a lot of practice because I'm not gonna lie, when you first start being different, it's definitely a I wouldn't say like a guilty feeling, but it's like a sinking in your chest. Like you realize that you're different from the people around you.
Mhm.
So I feel like it just takes a lot of self-love and you need a circle of people that are somewhat like-minded or accept you for who you are, or you're never going to get to the point of being who you are no matter what.
I definitely agree. And like with the thing, like how everybody wants to be accepted, like everybody wants a community because like we need a community. And so if you like when we start school, we gonna automatically gravitate towards like a community of people. And they might not be like the people like they might do things that we don't necessarily agree with, but we might just stick around because we don't got no other friends. And so like I think it's like just like getting over the fear of just being by yourself to like learn yourself to then find people that are like more aligned with who you are and like your beliefs and what you like to do.
It's difficult. It's like with both of you. It's human nature. We are tribal people, right? We came from tribes in Africa. So we are tribal people. So we always search for a community and stuff like that. And a lot of people will search for that community or something that will have other people. That's why a lot of people, religion and stuff like that, they will do that because it's they share the same beliefs and stuff. That's why religion is so big and stuff like that. And gangs and stuff like that as well. They're so big. A lot of these kids join because they want to have a sense of community. So it's very, very much of a discipline thing. You got to get rid of the fear and not get like you can't think about what other people feel. Like you need to start not worrying about what other people feel. I know it's difficult, but yeah, you need to get rid of that fear. You just need to think to yourself on like how would this benefit me? You feel me?
We gave like a lot of advice about like struggling to express ourselves and how we do it. But what tools do you guys use to communicate when you feel frustrated and just like unheard?
I feel like I got really lucky with the family that I have because I've always felt comfortable like expressing myself with my words, and I've the vocabulary to say that I am frustrated and to rely on my family to kind of work with me to figure things out. But sometimes you don't really want to talk. Like when I get frustrated, sometimes I just want to be by myself and calm down. And I feel like one of the best ways I calm myself down is like being alone and listening to music that kind of articulates the feelings or emotions that you're feeling at the time. So you kind of process what you got going on and then talk about it. So you're not as angry or as emotional when you speak, because that kind of like defeats the purpose of trying to communicate and get your point across, because you're either yelling or you're upset and it just doesn't come across right.
The tools I use is again what Anaya said is the music. If I'm overly frustrated and I can't get a point across, I use music. I remember like back in like a few years ago, I used to try to get the point. It's too much energy just to try to get a point across because they're not going to listen, right? because I deal with this on a daily basis and stuff like that, where I try to teach somebody something, or I try to tell something like this is the way, this, that, and the third. You can't, it's too much energy just to do that, right? So I'll say just kind of forget about it. Like, get your point across and don't be frustrated on if they are unheard or they're not communicating that back as well. You feel me? Because it may not be meant for them. Whatever you're speaking, whatever you're talking about, they may not just want to hear it and stuff like that. So that's why I say.
And Divine and Tamara, I want to get y'all in a second, but Darren, you brought up a really good point, or scenario, I should say, that sometimes your point is not going to be heard. Like, sometimes adult kids, whoever you're talking to, they don't want to hear your point, or they are so set in their ways that you can yell till your face is blue and you're still not going to get through to that person. And kind of sometimes accepting that you're just never going to have the same opinion on certain things is, I feel like that's so beneficial to everyone's mental health, that sometimes people just have differences, and that's okay to think differently on things, but at least come to a compromise of respecting that other person as a human being and that they can have an opinion.
I would also say a tool that really helped me was praying. Like, I know a lot of people really don't have that spiritual like prayer life, but like it doesn't, like, I would say it don't affect you just like talking out loud and talking to yourself. And it really helped me like understand myself and like help me understand like how I needed to grow, like what areas I need to fix, because I know that other people might have issues and like how other people like ways affect me. I know that my ways affect other people too. And so it's just like I know I can't control how they act, but I can control how I act. So I would say praying, that really helped me get through like so much in my life when I was at like a darkest point. And it helped me just to be patient, and just because you never know when your prayer gonna be answered. So it's just like had to be patient and just use that tool. That's really helpful.
Do y'all have any like communication skills that y'all think every teen should learn? So just like when they by themselves, or like when they in school, when they at work, like what skills that they just always have? Or is it just the ones y'all just said?
You can't be a people pleaser, right? Coming from somebody who's recovering from trying to please people, you can't be a people pleaser, because you're not going to get far in life trying to please everybody that comes your way or comes across your path. So communication all kind of start within yourself. Don't first and foremost, don't worry about what other people is going to think. Worry about getting your point across. Worry about the one individual out of 1,000 people, if you're doing public speaking and stuff like that, that you're going to reach. Don't mostly worry about, you need to be in the moment. You can't think about the future. You can't think about the past. You need to be in the moment. I feel like that's what teens should learn, is not care on what other people is going to think, because everybody's going to have their own opinion. Everybody's going to have their own thoughts. They're going to have their own opinions on you and own thoughts. And most of the time, they already have their opinions set on you before you start talking or communicating to them, right? So no matter what you say, it's not going to really affect them. So
I'd say that one of the best things I learned, and thank God I learned it early on, is that not necessarily there's a time and place for everything, but something to that effect, that you have to treat every person differently and you have to communicate to them differently, because we're all different. So going with that and the not caring, I feel like whether it be junior achievement, wellness, something, I feel like it should start in elementary schools on having a curriculum on figuring out how you talk to people. Because I feel like a lot of teens, and they don't get jobs because of this too, if you're not aware of professional language and how workspaces are with that type of stuff, you're just not going to understand it. So you're like comparing apples to oranges, and I feel like we need to be taught and given that toolbox of communicating effectively to adults in the way that they want us to speak to them, because not everybody gets that training at home, that you need to say yes ma'am, no ma'am, and certain stuff like that, and using certain vocabulary to get your point across. Not everybody gets that at home, so they're talking how they talk to their parents, like code switching. Not everybody gets that Not everybody is aware of that. I think everybody in this call and hopefully our audience at home knows what code switching is. But I just feel like learning how to talk to people and meeting them where they're at is a good way to get your point across. So I feel like we need to work on getting that to everybody.
I would say one of the points you made about like professionalism, like professional language and like yes ma'am and yes sir and all of that. I feel like especially in households, certain with like Black households, it's still different. Like the language we use in every household is different because I know like my best friend, her mom raised her kids to say yes ma'am, yes sir to everybody. I was just raised to say that to my elders. So I was only saying that to like my great granny or just like somebody I just met, but I wasn't saying that with my mom or something. So, but like kids nowadays, like my nephew and stuff, we don't. It's not like on purpose, but we not enforcing him to say yes, ma'am, no, sir, because we don't even say that no more for real. But it's like when he grows up and he gets into certain professional spaces, he'll have to use those words, and so it's like at some point you have to like take the time out to teach children like, okay, you say this in this space. When you just meet somebody, you use these words like that. But we can go a little into more detail. But how do you think schools can better support students in expressing themselves and communicating effectively?
I would say like when it comes to like when you have like a predominantly like Black institution school, like girls school, and you have like white teachers and all that, it's just like they don't really try to understand them, and they just I hate that you just categorize them as this like loud and just like as they have like no future for themselves. And I know like some of us don't really give like a good example or just show off like, but just like I don't know, I just feel like they don't understand. It's just like that's all that they know. I just don't give them a chance. Like they just already judge them off for like what they see or not, but don't get the chance to like understand them or just like know who they are. And my advice would just to be like, relax, teachers. Just get into the groove and understand who your students is because you wouldn't be there if it wasn't for them students. So you just gotta be mindful. Be very demure. Like
Okay, schools can do a whole bunch of things. I mean, the schools right now it's not as bad as it was 10 years ago, right? They are trying to make an effort, but there's a whole bunch of other things that the schools can do to make students feel comfortable about communication and expressing themselves, right? And the first thing is, like I said before, is get rid of them books about stupid stuff that we don't use. I mean, again, all my knowledge and all my intelligence and everything that I learned that I can use and I'm in the position I'm at right now did not come from no school. It came from research. It came from self-research, right? So I feel like people need to learn arts, communication, philosophies, stuff like that. People need to take in the schools first and foremost need to get not teachers. It's not the teachers' fault, but they need to allow the teachers to be more interactive with their students. You feel me? So that means changing the I feel like the classrooms may be a little too big. Because we all packed in one classroom. There's about 30, 40 students in one classroom. You think a teacher is supposed to interact and communicate with all of them. Also, the classroom itself looked like a damn jailhouse. So I mean, the way I learned, I remember if there's a classroom with all white, just walls and all white, right? White. I'm not learning nothing in that class. I already know because that looks like I'm in the jailhouse. And then so just changing the environment on how school is and not having to set up like a rat experiment and having to set up like a place to learn. Maybe have more time of us going outside and stuff like that. Learning outside. That's one of the best things one of my teachers did. She took us all outside, right? It was in my sign language class. She took us all outside and we allowed to learn. Going to nature is one of the better ways for us to communicate and expressing ourselves. Because it might seem like simple, but there's scientifically proof that nature helps stimulate the brain and help get your brain thought. It makes you more comfortable. It's nature. So doing this whole bunch of other things that the school can start doing. making students feel uncomfortable. It's changing the subjects that they teach. It's changing. It's having more important classes like having everything. Shoot, I feel like we should have a class that teaches, like, kind of guide us on the spiritual journey, essentially, kind of like a rites of passage class. I feel like that's important too.
Okay, to add on to what you're saying, I think what we all can agree upon is that people need to be more empathetic or sympathetic, what have you, and to put yourself in other people's shoes. We all have prejudices against other people. That's just how people work, I feel like. So, and this might even start in the teaching profession, like before you get your degrees, ethics classes, and classes like that to teach you, what is it, sociology? I think sociology is already a class you have to take, but really harping on the fact that you really don't know these people. And yes, you come together in the classroom and you spend all this time together, but people have vastly different lives once they go home. And I feel like I've just been blessed again with this amazing opportunity to go to Walnut because it genuinely is a melting pot. You get to see all of the backgrounds of Cincinnati. You get to see all of the different ways of thinking, the processes that people go through mentally as they do assignments or as they process grief, trauma, just life stuff in general. And I feel like it's really exposed me to just putting myself in somebody else's shoes. I feel like accommodation wise, people need to like just be mindful of what's going on at home, especially like during COVID. I feel like they definitely tried to be more mindful that we were all like struggling, but they still weren't, being as considerate of we're kids. And this is like a really scary time and everybody's kind of processing it differently. And I know you can't accommodate everything to every child individually because there is a teacher shortage and teachers don't make as much money as they should as it is. But just I feel like taking that extra step to really building that community relationship between parents, students, and teachers and faculty is really important. And also like the involvement in changing legislation on what's taught. Because I understand the historic significance of Shakespeare, but like why wouldn't we incorporate other forms of old timey like plays and things like that to really relate to the audience that we're trying to get to learn? Because I feel like if we're not engaged, we're not going to learn.
Like when it comes to schools in general, it'll take a lot of work to like just change what school curriculums look like because of like various presidents, administrations. It's like affected the budgets for school and stuff. And then like when you had the No Child Left Behind program that did a lot of damage, whatever. So it's like kind of hard to just say like, okay, schools like the institution of school should like change. It's kind of hard to just like set in stone like what change needs to happen. But I think we can definitely start with like representation. A lot of like Bell Hooks, for example, she stresses representation and just like being able to like see yourself in media, how helpful it is, especially for children to like love themselves or like to learn easier. Like if you got Shakespeare or something, pull out some Black books from the Harlem Renaissance or something like that, just like incorporating various cultures and stuff to better represent, especially in minority schools. It's like if these kids is already at an underfunded school with hella security, making them feel like they in jail, why not give them something that'll make them more happy? If they seem like, for example, The Wiz. Like The Wiz is like my favorite movie, and it's like one of the very few Black musical productions. So it's like, why not give kids like hope and just something like joy for like minority youth who usually don't see that. And also just like teachers, I would say for my teachers, the best teachers I had, they really took feedback from students and let it be a space where we could just like talk to them. Like my ethnic studies teacher, for example, we told her like, well, basically we did really bad on the test. And she was like, y'all, what's the problem? Like, why y'all failing? And we told her like some things that weren't working. And so she took that and she changed it. And she gave us like an easier route. And so where we would be able to pass and better understand her class. And then my other teacher, he just let us talk. Like we was really just talking to him. Like that's one of my favorite teachers because we would just kiki with him and we would still be learning. We would still be passing if they was paying attention in class. Like, so I think just like setting an environment where we could not be friends with our teachers, but just be in a space where we can just talk to them while it's still in like a professional level.
To add on to that, because Divine made me mention, made me remember an amazing point. Right. If we're in a minority school, a school with mostly Black kids, right, and you're teaching me about George Washington, a person who owned slaves, right? Alexander Hamilton, a person who probably looks like, I'm not too sure about Alexander Hamilton, but the way he was sounding with that Federalist stuff, he probably owned some slaves. What's his name? Andrew Jackson, whatever his name is, the dude who like slaughtered a bunch of people, like a whole bunch of people, Native Americans, stuff like that. All these white people who has committed genocides over the years. Christopher Columbus, the person who enslaved the whole island of Cuba. I mean, and then they took them back. So there is so much things that they teach us about these people, and they make them seem great, right? But the only Black person they want to talk about is Martin Luther King on Martin Luther King Day. And they will talk about Abraham Lincoln freeing all the slaves, but they're not going to talk about anybody else. They're not going to talk about anybody else. And we are Black kids learning about all these white people doing these amazing stuff. But but none of people who doesn't look like us, they're not showing nobody that looks like us doing amazing stuff like that, right? That's going to have a disconnection. That's already going to have a disconnection of self-expression and stuff like that. It's going to make you self-conscious of your own body and your own skin and stuff like that, because you don't see your people up there. You don't see people who look like you doing stuff like that. They don't teach about Huey P. Newton. They don't teach about the Black Panther Party. They don't teach about Malcolm X. They don't teach about Mansa Musa, the richest man alive, who was a Black man. They don't teach them about none of that. But they will sure as hell get straight to the point on George Washington, and get straight to the point on Alexander Jackson or whatever his name is, and get straight to the point on all these colonists and people who enslaved people, was ruthless, was murderers, killers to our people, and act like they was all great and amazing. And then we read about their history but we never read about our own history. That's the issue with school. And as a kid, especially when you're like 3-4 years old and you seeing all that, you hearing all that, and it's ingrained into your mind that our history started in slavery. They'll never teach us about the history before slavery. They're always going to start with slavery, and they never go before that. That's going to have a mental effect on especially Black kids, which needs to stop. That needs to stop. But I digress.
That actually made me think of a point before we go into our next question about self-expression with minority children, like children of color. I think it's important not just for schools but parents to teach children like their own history. So like when they go into these schools and stuff, and like the school isn't going to teach your kid the right history, to be able to teach your kid the right history. Like my dad, for example, from like a young age, he taught me Black history. He was like, you Black, and you finna watch this, and you finna read this. And so when I got to school and like Black History Month came around, or just like history came around, I would just love the subject because I was learning something new, because I already knew my history. So it's just like, okay, now I'm just learning about somebody else. So I think it's important, not just for schools, but also just like families, to teach children of color their own history, because it's definitely more helpful, and it definitely affects your self-expression if you don't know like your history like as a people, and then you're going into spaces where they're not going to teach you it either. And so it's going to like bring you to a point later in life where you're just like learning everything, and you're going to feel a little bit behind, because like I'll come around and I already know it. And so I'm gonna look at you sideways if you telling me you don't know what the Black Panther Party is. And so like that's definitely gonna affect like the way you see yourself and just like your self-expression.
To add on to both of y'all's points, I completely agree. And I feel like kids, no matter what race, what background, whether their socioeconomic status, what have you, I feel like everyone needs to be exposed to as much culture as possible, especially because we live in the days of the internet. There's so many different resources that you can get your hands on to teach your children about the different histories and the way that we're all interconnected. That's how I really fell in love with history as a whole and like world history because my grandpa was a genealogist. Excuse me. So like I really got to in-depthly learn about my history as an African American person, but also explore the different histories across the globe. And as I feel like this is also a good segue because the internet is such a good tool to, be learning with. What's some ways the internet has changed your vocabulary and the way that you think about certain things? And
Go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, you can go first.
I'm just gonna say, like, when it comes to like the advice for like people who when the schools like don't teach it and just like who just don't like announce it, I would just say like if you can start a club to do that, like just to get engaged with that and just like start that if you don't already have that. Like if you feel that type of way, take action for it and do something about it so you don't have to continue feeling that way.
I think that we've had an amazing conversation today about self-expression, and especially getting across, our thoughts and our emotions. We're coming to a close here soon. So I'd just like to say again that my name is Anaya Jordan, and I go to Walnut Hills High School. I am now a senior, and I'm going to let the rest of my co-hosts give their names, grades, and where they go to school, and then we're going to give you all our QR codes, or I don't know if we're able to do that here, but talk to you about our back to school giveaway that we have soon and our social media.
It's Mia. Sorry. I go to St. Ursula Academy and I am a senior.
My name is Darian. I go to Royal Mount Cincinnati State, but I'm also technically a student of Princeton as a senior. My social media is markel.upcoming, or you can follow my business page, which is called Through the Herbs, where I talk about healing stuff like that.
All right, my name is Devine. I go to Thomas More University. I am an current freshman. I just wanted to say follow our podcast social media, which is Rising Youth Voices, which will also give y'all information about our back to school giveaway this coming Labor Day weekend. We'll be giving away school supplies and toiletries and bags for anybody who really needs them. And we also gonna have some snacks there for y'all just because it's gonna be hot. And we're gonna be at Washington Park and catch us like in the afternoon time. So yeah. All right, thank you all for tuning in, and that's the end of our podcast. Bye.
See you.